Culture is amazing. Every facet of who a person is can be connected to their culture, and cultures are always evolving. A huge driving force in that evolution is people bringing in new ideas and experiences and merging them with the cultures and groups that are already present. Cities are the breeding grounds of new culture. Today, we're going to talk about the people who make that happen. You need immigrants in your fantasy city. With them, we can set the foundations to build our city's culture and future. Let's get world building. Welcome back to Worldbuilding Fantasy Cities. Last time, we covered forming the foundations of your fantasy city with its landscape and history. If you'd like to check out that video, click here. As long as you don't mind a lot of rambling and reduced quality, I try to step it up with this one, so hopefully you guys enjoy. Regardless of that, let's begin with the next section of our pie, people and cultures. As I was making this video, I realized the full scale of everything I wanted to cover and decided to take a smaller piece. I did have a big lunch after all. So, today we will be focusing on the people of our cities, and in our next video, delve deeper into the cultures made and influenced by them. No need to waste any more time. Let's get world building. So, why should we care about the people in our cities? It is far too easy to think of the citizens of our cities as background to our setting's plots and stories. But, if given the proper attention, the citizens themselves will drive ideas and create whole new stories for you to explore. Taking the time to flesh out the people in your city will cause the city to become a character of its own, with a rich tapestry of unique ideas and places to explore. This will help create a place in your setting unlike anywhere else. Don't worry, we're not talking about writing a backstory and traits for every person in your city. That wouldn't be fun or interesting for anyone involved. We are talking about how individual groups bring with them their own unique identity and culture and merge this identity with other groups. This creates a whole new identity unique to your city and brings your city to life. When looking at our world, it's impossible to imagine a city without thinking about the people who live within it. After all, you can't have a city without people. Look at New York City, with its diverse collection of boroughs and neighborhoods that were formed by tons of different groups from all over the world coming into the city and bringing with them their own unique identity. Cities like this owe their entire existence to the diversity brought along by their unique history. However, we might not all be trying to make New York City, so we will need to figure out just how diverse we want our city to be. When looking at the diversity within cities, we see a ton of variation. You will need to decide on where you want your city to fall between our two extremes. Firstly, let's take a look at our cosmopolitan city or multicultural hub. Multicultural cities have a variety of ethnicities and cultural groups existing in a single location. These cities will likely still have segregation and discrimination within them. The history of your city will lead to its level of diversity. Multicultural hubs typically form in areas where a history of large-scale and continuous immigration has taken place. These cities are often located in areas that have importance on a global scale and act as a gateway for individuals entering a new country. Consider how this acceptance of immigration happened in your city. Was it from the city's location along trade routes? Did the city directly incentivize immigration? Did it bake the idea of being a gateway into its identity? Examples of multicultural cities are New York City. Its location on one of the world's largest natural harbors and image as a gateway for immigrants looking for a new start through areas like Ellis Island created the conditions for its growth and prosperity. Toronto. Over half of Toronto's population is immigrants, having many waves of migration from loyalists and escaped slaves coming from the United States to escape prosecution, to the large number of Europeans and Asians moving into the city to find work and escape from the horrors of war. Dubai. The discovery of oil led to Dubai's rapid growth, allowing it to become an autonomous state and control its policies. Through effective negotiations and diplomacy, it was able to remove restrictions on the import of labor and export of money, bringing attention from companies all over the world. This, among other things, led to it becoming a city of immigrants. Sydney. Following World War II, Australia launched a massive immigration program, targeting certain countries and incentivizing immigration. By the 1970s, multiculturalism displaced its previous policy of selective immigration. As of 2021, over 40% of Sydney's population was born overseas. Its location as the most populous city and on Sydney Harbor aided this growth as a multicultural hub. San Francisco, the California Gold Rush, led to not only the initial explosion of population for the city, but also immigration from Asia. Attempts to limit immigration from certain countries through the Chinese Exclusion Act were due to the massive influx of Asian workers through Angel Island, who were exploited for cheap labor in areas such as the railroad industry. All of these cities have a rich history that led to them becoming the multicultural hubs they are today. As we look at them, we can see some common trends to assist in our world building. A location along large trade routes, coastal access such as natural harbors for easy movement of people from great distances, and a need for labor in which powerful people often take advantage of immigrant groups. These cities often grow to be some of the largest cities in the world, likely due to this immigration. All of these cities attempted to bring in certain groups that were wanted while finding ways to exclude people from other groups that they saw as undesirable. However, not all cities become these large multicultural hubs. Some are homogeneous, or as I like to call them, multicultural behemoths. Homogeneous cities are places where one ethnicity or cultural group is so dominant that anything else is pushed away, often due to discrimination and social isolation. These places have little diversity among the residents, at least in terms of their presented culture. Any city that gets large enough will have diversity within it, so certain circumstances will cause a city to be homogeneous. They must be isolated in some way. This can be physical isolation, but isolation due to social pressures can also cause this. They may have an isolationist approach to their politics. They could also have some sort of authoritarian government that is pushing for this isolation. This government could have preferred immigrants who match the culture of the ideal citizen. They could also be performing some sort of mass culling or genocide against those who do not fit their image of a preferred citizen. This could also take the form of pushing for a culture of exterior uniformity, making anyone who stands against the grain socially scrutinized or shunned. Finally, cities could become homogeneous over time as unique groups come together to a point of creating an entirely unique culture that overtakes the previous groups. Just as the history of our city will decide if it's diverse, it will also decide if it is uniform. Some examples of homogeneous cities are places like Portland, Oregon, El Paso, Texas, and Detroit, Michigan. These three examples from the United States show places where a specific group was driven to settle, and that place became an area for members with a shared history and culture to congregate. From income inequality to the search for work, these places grew to be some of the least diverse cities in the United States. Places like Seoul, South Korea, and Tokyo, Japan, have had modern shifts in demographics leading to more diversity. However, with places like Japan, with its isolationist past, there is still a need for people to fit into the molds of Japanese society. In any city where people face discrimination, they will find ways of expressing their culture, either in the privacy of their homes or in safe places. You should consider what these places are for groups in your city. The inclusion of these safe places will help your city feel more real while also providing interesting places to explore. It is also important to think of the ways your city maintains its level of diversity, from secret police taking people off the street to community centers showcasing marginalized communities' art. Showing these facets of your city will help give the feeling of the type of city you are creating and the culture of the people who live there. For example, many recently freed African Americans would look for ways of exploring their unique culture, but heavy discrimination forced them to do it in places that were allowed. In the post-Reconstruction South, you see the growth of gospel and ragtime music. Areas where this music could be sung and heard, such as churches and black establishments, would be places to explore culture. But they could also become targets for groups trying to discriminate against African Americans. Try to think of the places people can escape discrimination and explore their heritage in your cities, especially if you're going to have discrimination as a major point of contention, causing conflict between different groups. For the city I'm working on, Martzloch, I want it to be a multicultural hub, but to still have widespread discrimination due to its recent growth from immigrant populations. So, I will need a history of groups coming into the city and carving out a place within it, regardless of the groups already present resisting this change. I will be looking to design both designated neighborhoods and places that are cultural hotspots where these groups can find community through shared culture. Once we figure out how diverse your city is and how its diversity is treated by its residents, we can take a closer look at those people with demographics. What is demography? Demography is the study of human populations. The data collected from these studies are demographics. Demographics are typically related to the size of populations, the composition of populations, and how populations change over time. When it comes to our fantasy cities, I've picked out a few options that I find most relevant, but you can really do this with any type of information related to the populations of your city. Species. Your fantasy setting likely has countless different sentient species. Which ones can be found in your city? What percentages of your city's total population are within each group? Ethnicity and race. Within each of the species in your setting, there may be subspecies or specific races. How does this show in our city? Are there specific ethnicities in your city? What makes these ethnicities unique from one another? Sex and gender. The divide of sex may be different for different species in your setting. Maybe there's a reason for certain species to have a much higher female population, or vice versa. Certain historical events could also play a role in this. Gender varies widely in humans. Consider how it may vary in completely different species, such as in your fantasy setting. How does this change the city itself? Wealth disparity. How is wealth distributed among the citizens of your city? Is there a dominant noble or merchant class hoarding wealth? Is it more widely distributed, making everyone more equal money-wise? Is the wealth of your city concentrated in the hands of the few? What are the typical living conditions for your citizens? Does this follow species or racial lines? Are there any other areas it lines up with? Religion. There's likely a diversity of different religions and different sects of religions that are located within your city. Are these different religions accepted, or is this a large cause of conflict among your citizens? Have any groups merged views on religion to be accepted or escape prosecution? Education. How many people in your city can read? Depending on the time period your city is set in, this could vary wildly. Are there formal institutions of learning, or do people mainly learn at home? Is education something that's limited to the wealthy? Who controls what is taught within your city? And who might be resisting this control? I find fantasy cities often make the mistake of all education being related to magic. It might be worth exploring other forms of education outside of the arcane arts. Outside of these, there are plenty of other demographics to consider. Do people in your city have different capabilities, whether they be magical or from some other source? What is the country of origin for most people in your city? What occupation do people have in your city? We'll return to jobs a bit more in detail later on. But consider some of the work people are doing within your city. When looking at Martzloch, I sketched out some ideas for demographics and have created a few graphs to show them. As I said earlier, these will change as we continue working on our city. Nothing we make is set in stone. As our world continues to evolve, so too will our city. If you return to any demographics later, when you come up with new ideas, feel free to change anything. These should be used to guide your world building, not restricted. I will go into more detail on the specifics of my demographics in the next Making Martzloch video. If there's anything you guys want to know more about, please let me know in the comments below. But we will already see some trends. Primarily, we can see one group that seems to be dominant in the city, and others who don't have nearly as much representation on our graphs. Let's talk about majority and minority groups. A majority group is a group in a society that has the largest representation or power in said society. A minority group is a group in a society that has less representation or power than the majority. When looking at these, we should not necessarily be looking at population, but influence and power over other groups. Population can influence the power of a specific group, but it is not uncommon to see a group with a high population have little power. Look at the American South during the institution of slavery. Despite making up more than half of the population in some states, enslaved Africans had little to no power in these societies. In your city, look at who the dominant group is. How did they become the majority group? Did they settle the city? Take it by force? Manipulate politics? Or go through some other route? How does this group maintain control? What sort of institutions do they institute to maintain this power? For minority groups, consider how they exist in the society. What sort of minority groups exist here? How did the people of these minority groups arrive here? Why do they stay? What sort of conflict is generated by people who don't fit into the majority's view for the city? It is important to consider that a majority group can be based on any of the demographics, and can be different depending on which sphere of influence we are talking about. You could have a religious group pushing other groups out of the city through backhanded means. At the same time, wealthy nobles are rounding up poor laborers to build a new amphitheater, while humans are attacking elves in the street for not staying in the elven neighborhoods. These are all important things to consider, as the conflict generated by these interactions can fuel your storytelling and bring life into your city as minority groups try to carve out a place in your city. Now, let's take a look at how these groups arrived in our city. Time to bring in immigrants. First, I believe it's important to cover some terms. Immigrants are people who have moved from a foreign country. There will also be migrants in our city, which is a more general term for any person who has moved either between or within a country. But for the purposes of our video, I'm going to use migrant to refer to people who have moved from within the same country. Migrants are also important, as people moving from rural to urban environments is an important part of the history of the growth of cities. If you all would like a more in-depth look at this, we can talk about migrants in our video on influence and connections. If you'd like to be notified of future videos as they come out, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell down below. Now, let's take a closer look at these immigrant groups in our city and learn more about them. First off, why did they move here? Is your city a place that welcomes them? What is the main driving force in their immigration? Were they forced to move here against their will? Are they refugees from a disaster or war in another part of your world? Make sure to remember the push and pull factors affecting the immigrants coming to your city. Push factors are a reason that people move away from places, such as war or lack of food, while pull factors are reasons that people move to places, such as new job opportunity. They are pulled to your city, while being pushed away from a different place. When immigrants arrive to your city, are they facing discrimination? Are certain demographics and organizations pushing for this discrimination? Why? Are immigrants still coming into the city in large numbers? How is this impacting our demographics? How are these immigrant groups integrated into your cities? Are they spread throughout somewhat evenly? Or are they forced to live in certain neighborhoods? Are these immigrants finding enclaves themselves to seek protection in numbers? Or find some amount of familiarity with shared cultural practices? Look at Chinatowns and Little Italies in US cities such as New York for examples of this. Is conflict being created by the arrival of new immigrant groups? If so, what sort of conflict? If the arrival of these immigrants was a long time ago, what was the outcome of this initial conflict? Are there still long-lasting tensions? Has the dominant group built in systematic ways of oppressing these groups into their laws and political systems? What sort of impacts have these caused on your city? For the creation of our city, there is no group more important or interesting to explore in our world building than immigrants. This is because immigrant groups bring cross-cultural exchange into our cities. Cross-cultural exchange is the interaction between two cultures in which both sides exchange ideas, knowledge, practices, and many other facets of culture. This exchange will influence and change both cultures, birthing out of it whole new cultural ideas. I believe this is one of the most interesting part of cities. Cities being the meeting place of these different cultures, you will see tons of ideas, beliefs, traditions, food, clothing, and just about everything in between move between groups and transform into unique expressions. The unique way these cultures transform create whole new cultures within your city, making it unique from anywhere else in your setting. We will explore this much more in our next video on culture in your city. Now, let's return briefly to occupations. Let's expand what we're looking at when we think of the sort of jobs people work within your city. Consider what are some of the more unique jobs. There will certainly be blacksmiths, traders, bakers, and all sorts of other jobs within your city. but maybe something makes them stand out compared to other places. What is this thing? Maybe the bakers use some sort of special ingredient in their bread that makes people float in the air. Imagine what this could mean for your city. Whole new ways of moving around, whole industries born out of this. Speaking of which, look at all these different industries that could emerge. Which ones emerged only in this city, or at least started in this city? Is there anything driving certain industries in your city based on certain groups that live there? Which groups are working these unique jobs? Do we see any major division of labor based on your demographics? Are a large number of minority or immigrant groups relegated to certain types of work? Are they being exploited for their labor? Examples of this are groups like the Chinese and Irish immigrants coming into the United States. Are some groups forced into a servant class? Are certain groups in your city enslaved? How are these systems maintained by the majority group or government in your city? We can go into far more detail on systems of oppression in the future, as well as different occupations. If y'all are interested, let me know down in the comments below. But let's look at the final piece of our city's people, as the people who live in your city aren't the only ones we should be worrying about. Let's look at the urban and rural people in and around our city. We will go into much more detail on the influences of the rural people in our future video on influence and connections. But we need to consider how people are eating in our cities. For most of human history, people lived outside of cities. This is because it takes a lot of land to support the population of a city, and people must live on and farm said land. The initial causes of urbanization stem from the need for markets to distribute or sell a surplus of food. There is a history of people centralizing this surplus and power created from it to create governments of all sorts. We call this human history, for the most part. As innovations in agriculture allowed for further surplus, reducing the need for everyone to be a subsistence farmer, we see the expansion of the specialization of labor. Because of the surplus, people can work different jobs and produce things at a scale they couldn't before. Living around these markets allowed for easy access to not only the place where they trade, but also the resources brought in by others. This led to a positive loop, causing these centers to grow more and more. But it seems only to a point until we get to modern times with industrialization. Looking at these stats for the urbanization of Western Europe, we can see it isn't until we get into the age of industrialization that our population of people living within cities starts to skyrocket. Cities also offer access to protection, often funded by the surplus of labor and directed by the centralized power. Fantasy settings may be more likely to have larger cities with a higher proportion of the population living within them. Given the inherent dangers of living in a fantasy world with dragons and murder-hobo adventurers, the protection offered by central powers could be quite appealing. This could combine with magic, filling the spot of industrialization, making food production easier and requiring fewer people, meaning our urban population centers could grow to massive heights. Although, this all depends on your setting. What impact does magic have on agriculture? Is magic commonplace? Do the dangers of your world make living away from walls and centers of magical knowledge unrealistic? If people do live in rural areas, how do they keep themselves safe? Do they rely on protections from the gods, deals with dragons, the enchantment of the land? Regardless of the level of urban versus rural populations, there will still be people outside of your cities. So, do not forget about these rural people. Think about how they interact with your city. What systems does the city have in place to guarantee the flow of food from the rural lands to the urban center? Physically, how do people get into and out of your city? Most of the food for cities is generated in the surrounding landscape. If yours is different, why? How does your city maintain food arriving into it? What demographics of people are in the surrounding landscape of your city? Are those surrounding people only farmers, or do they have other jobs as well? Cities also rely on resources coming from both the local region as well as all across the world. How are these arriving to your city? We will look more at the flow of trade when we get to our video on influence and connection. However, we have reached the end of our video. Now we have people in our city and an idea of how they got there. Without even touching on culture, we have sources for conflict from the people themselves. Next time, we will talk about culture within our cities. As these immigrant groups bring in their own culture, it will transform our city, just as our city will transform the cultures of these groups. Get your melting pots ready. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We're almost to 100 subscribers. If you have any questions on world building or future video topic ideas, feel free to throw them down in the comment section below. Also, feel free to talk about the city you're making. I love reading about other people's projects. Thanks again. This has been the World Building Matrix, and I will see you in the next world.